All right, so we're back on air. This is just going to be the second episode of Three Black Lives. Again, just bringing just thoughts
Did it
from
say on
myself.
air on my screen?
Yes, it
Oh,
does.
there it is. Sorry, yo, go continue with your intro. That was good.
I like it.
No, you're smooth. Just keep going. That's my bad. Just start
so,
over.
so as I say, this is the second episode of Three Black Lives. We'll probably keep that within the clip. Don't worry about it. So just myself, Preston Whitlock. We got Price Thomas and we got Timon. That are going to be joining us as well today. And one of the things they want to be able to speak about is going to be Colin Kaepernick. Pretty much the talk of the town for the past month or so since people first saw that he was sitting down and then progressing to kneeling during the national anthem. So what we want to examine is not really Colin Kaepernick per se, but how should we protest? If you feel that there's something going wrong in this world and you want to be able to make a stand, what's going to be the right way to be able to voice your opinion. And we want to look at it from two perspectives. The first one is going to be, what are going to be the athlete's role? So they have a much bigger platform than myself or Timon or Price or, pretty much an average person in the world. What should they be taking as responsibility to be able to get a message across? And then we're going to take a look at, what can we do as individuals to be able to help push that message forward even more. And then lastly, one of the things I want to be able to bring up is just kind of take a look at some of those protests that have occurred in the past. And one of the hot points for me, especially is going to be how people like to invoke Martin Luther King Jr. as the poster child per se for civil protest. And Time is going to be pretty much the soundboard for that one, as he has a little bit more experience and depth of knowledge in terms of being able to speak about the past and the different roles that different types of protests played in pushing forward the civil rights movement. So with that, do you guys have any other intro parts that you want to be able to say before we get going on this topic?
Let's go.
Fuck no, let's roll. God, really? Already? Damn it. Shit.
As you can see, Price has a problem with cursing. So Colin Kaepernick, the reason why he is protesting, he said that he doesn't want to represent a flag or stand up to a flag or an anthem that still oppresses black people when there are bodies in the street and people are getting off with just paid administrative leave. Unless you've been living under a rock, essentially you know that there's been a lot of outrage in terms of the shooting of unarmed black men. Whether there's, quote, reason for it, they're not following orders, or they might be armed, or they might be reaching for something, or, again, there's so many different circumstances that have gone on with multiple of those shootings, whether it's the recent one with Crutcher or Tyree King, the child, or if you want to go back to Tamir Rice, or if you want to go back to the genesis of all of this with Mike Brown. Mike Brown, if you want to go even further back and go to Trayvon Martin. So, again, he's trying to bring awareness to a situation where police brutality is deemed to be unfairly targeting African Americans or people of color, which I think he's definitely well within his rights to be able to do that. So again, I just want to get y'all's perspective on it before I delve a little bit further into mine on what do you feel his role is within this movement and bringing awareness, and what do you think an athlete's role in general is in terms of bringing awareness to social situations? Is it their right to be able to do so they just stay in their lane and play their sports? What do you guys think the preferred method should be in terms of voicing their opinions? And just to kick it off, Price, since you're furthest left on my screen here, we'll kick off with you first before we move on to timing.
The obvious answer is yes. He's obviously well within his rights, and he's well within his constitutional rights, and that's what the First Amendment's all about. It's the freedom of protest. He's not doing anything wrong. Let me back this out one step further. I think we need to just address the simple fact that we're having this conversation. That the three of us are sitting here having a very real conversation over which unarmed thing was the worst in the past 3 years, right? It's not necessarily a conversation that we should even be having, right? Like, what the fuck are we even talking about? We're saying, like, which one of these ludicrously unjust instances were the worst? We had this conversation off air, like, right before, and there's like a discussion. Well, I think this one was bad. Well, I think the one with the autistic man was bad. Well, the kids are pretty bad too. That's nonsense. That's one of my beefs. Beef part deux is the fact that everyone's so fucking butthurt over what he's doing and refusing to basically take a look at the why. And I'm sure we'll get into that, and I know you guys are anxious to speak on that. But people like that fucking, whatever that conservative woman's name is, Tommy something or other, and her like ridiculous mouth diarrhea about how if you don't like America or if you don't like the national anthem, you should leave. I mean, first of all, that's just astonishingly unenlightened and just like a really stupid thing to say. I don't think she's stupid. I think she's actually pretty bright because I think she's just pandering to a really nonsensical conservative agenda. But the fact that people rally behind shit like that, it's kind of confused the whole thing. We've gotten away from the why, and we're so focused on the what that we've lost sight of the whole issue. Back to the actual question, I do think that, athletes obviously, and a lot of them have said this, Arian Foster and a lot of other guys have mentioned that they have a special platform. They have more eyes on them. People hang on their every word, for better or for worse, and so they have the opportunity to be very influential. I would hesitate, and I'm sure you guys may or may not disagree, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I hesitate with the word obligation. I think opportunity, and I hesitate with obligation. I don't know. I feel that everyone has to, participate in something because of a particular social group that they fall into. I think that if they want to or feel compelled to, then they should. And I think that on is absolutely what needs to happen, and I think it's a civil way to do it, and I think that it's being sort of bastardized and it's being bent out of shape, and I do have to commend Kaepernick himself for super judicious and very enlightened through this whole process, meeting with veterans, talking with the brass of his own team, and really taking a stance that makes sense. This was the kind of thing that initially you could see being like, oh God, this is going to get shot down because, it'll come out in 2 weeks that, whatever was going on was sort of nonsense and ill-fated. The truth is, and the good news is that it's well thought out, man. And I don't give a fuck what Kate Upton thinks. I don't care what sourcing opinions from people who don't fucking matter. The fact is there's so many people on his side, and not just people that fall into that bucket. It's not just black people. There's white folks on his side. There's black veterans on his side, and people who understand that. And it's been said 1,000 times, like, this is what these people have been fighting for, right? The right to protest and the right to peacefully protest. And you're just outright stupid, and I don't like you anymore if you tell me there's not a problem. And that's it. And that's, we can talk about the how and the why or the what, but there's a problem, and there's a very big problem. And it's a problem for all three of us. It's a very real problem for the three of us, that if we read a book in our car because we're waiting for our children and we just get blasted, homeboy gets to go on administrative leave, which is dope. It's like ISS. You just don't work. You get that's a fucking slap on the wrist, which is crazy. So long story short, props to the man. And, I'm not saying you have to agree with the how, but let's analyze the what. And let's take a step back from the radical, you're offending nationalism and the very strange sort of North Korean view we've taken as if everybody has to stand and salute, and think about why. Like, why is this important? And that's my vibe for this whole talk, man, is the why. Let's analyze things from a perspective of being educated, first of all, not getting all our goddamn information from Facebook. Do some work on your end, read an article, understand that the media is biased, and then let's talk about why.
All right, Tommy, what are your thoughts?
I'm out.
Well, in a sentence, I think he nailed it. I think when you're trying to take a stand for something, you obviously have to be strategic about how you do it, where you do it. All those things are basically you maximizing your impact. And if anyone's upset about something, it's probably because he did it too well. Obviously, the facts are out there. The number of tweets, the number of conversations on screen that have happened about it, it's hard to say it wasn't effective. So I'll end at that. But one thing that I personally always say is that racism, in my eyes, is tantamount to sexism and homophobia. Like it's all xenophobia and it's all prejudice, and it all needs to go away. It all is holding back our society from progressing. And in other cases, I'll move over to women's rights for a minute. I think of two very notable protests, so to speak, that happened in a very big forum. One of them that comes to mind is Patricia Arquette at the 2015 Oscars. And the other one that comes to mind is Viola Davis when she won her Emmy as the first black woman to win an Emmy for, I think it was a lead actress or an Emmy in general. I don't watch award shows, so I don't know which award it was, but I watched both speeches on social media, and they were really powerful. They were shared thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times. And in both of those cases, those were women taking an opportunity to speak about a worthwhile agenda when it wasn't necessarily the right time or the right place. Like Patricia Arquette focused more on equal wages because there's a huge wage disparity between leading actress roles and lead actor roles in Hollywood. And that was something that she found to be a major enough issue that when she's on stage winning an Oscar, which is obviously a special moment for someone, like that's almost like a Super Bowl for an actress, to then say, instead of focusing on herself or the people she needs to thank, she says, we need to talk about wage equality. And Viola Davis saying, we need to talk about there not being enough roles for African Americans in Hollywood. And there wasn't really that much backlash from that. No one said, you don't have the right to say what you wanted to say in that situation. It was disrespectful. You know, that's a moment we're supposed to be up there appreciating you and you're doing this. And I think largely it came down to people not having a lot of respect for Kaepernick as a person. You know, he was a little shit at times, I guess. You know, he's young, he's arrogant, he's tattooed. He's a quarterback. He's a quarterback, and they have their diva mentality a lot of the time. So maybe, you know, I think people really just started to attack him and were cynical of his message based on the image that they have of him. And it's very striking when you see people like Jerry Rice, who came out and originally said all lives matter in some tweet and went on with that bullshit. But then he came out and basically admitted that he was wrong. And not enough people are doing that, because I think at this point, everyone knows that there's a large network of support for Colin Kaepernick. Like, a lot of people are saying, you did absolutely what you're supposed to. You chose your right moment. You had a national audience, and you did it in a way that was constitutionally, proper or acceptable. And you did it in a way that was very effective. So I'm hoping that more people follow Jerry Rice's lead and recognize that, if anything, he just did his job too efficiently. Like, he picked the perfect way to create a conversation around this. And, you know, the second part of your question, I'll keep that short as well, is the obligation to protest. You decide how strongly you feel about an issue, and then you decide if you're doing enough. And if you find that you don't feel like you're doing enough relative to how strongly you feel about the issue, then you should do more. And if not, then you're a hypocrite. I personally feel like a hypocrite a lot of the time when it comes to the issue of race relations, and that's one thing that I'm trying to succeed in changing with this web series. Is I don't want to feel like just going and mouthing off on Facebook is all I'm doing to try and advance, you know, the black plight in America. And I don't think that's all I'm doing. I think being a successful black man and having a lot of conversations is a big part of, you know, changing the issue of race relations in America. But I want to do more. And when the more other people do more, the more prominent figures like Colin Kaepernick opt to do more, it makes me feel like even more of a hypocrite for not doing anything. And that's me personally. But if I had a problem with something and I wasn't doing anything, I would either have to have some sort of dissonance to allow me to continue on with my day, or I'd have to do more or feel like a hypocrite.
I mean, I gotta say that I definitely think I agree with both y'all. So in terms of just athletes being able to speak out, I think it's very important for them. You know, if they feel the need, again, as Price was saying, I don't think they should be obligated to. But I think if they feel the opportunity and they feel strong enough to want to be able to speak out, by all means, use your platform, right? Use your platform as best as you can to be able to get your message across. I'll speak about it from a little bit of a different perspective than what you guys were. So for me, if you look just directly at the national anthem, I think that's something that I would still be standing for, right? I always attribute the national anthem with military. I guess that's just something that's always just been brought up with me. My dad's a military veteran, so I always attribute it to military. But the biggest issue that I have with it is just watching the backlash to everything that's been going on with Kaepernick, where people just automatically think about, holy shit, somebody is hating my country, versus, again, like Price said, the why. I think that's so much more important. So while I still might make the decision to stand, the reason why he is kneeling is so much more important than me standing, that I think that should take precedence. The reason why people are just looking at the flag and the anthem and are pissed off about that, but aren't able to empathize with what's going on in the world in terms of African Americans or people of color getting shot, I think that speaks more about our lack of, quote, patriotism than Colin Kaepernick kneeling, right? Because America's supposed to be in a melting pot, you're supposed to respect your brother and sister, but the fact that people can't empathize with the plight and what's going on in terms of police brutality, are all police officers bad? No. I mean, I feel like none of us will say that. But there's too much of a pattern going on to be able to ignore.
Future episode.
Yeah, you just episode, right? But again,
we don't have the rights to NWA songs, do
we? We do not. But again, to be able to not empathize with the fact that there is clear evidence that unarmed African Americans, unarmed black men are being shot and killed with no repercussions, it blows my mind that people can't see that's the reason why he's kneeling. Like, it's mind-boggling to me. It's like, how do you guys don't see the bigger picture that he's trying to bring to light? And then if you just look at that, the way that he's created, I mean, Richard Sherman, I think today, even spoke about it. He spoke about Terrence Crutcher and what's been going on there, and he didn't take any questions in his press conference. It was about 2.5 minutes long. He spoke about police brutality and, his thoughts on that, took no questions, left. Price said it was the most calm mic drop that he's ever seen. But again, the athletes using that platform is nothing new. The Cavs did it earlier, with I think they had the I Can't Breathe shirts or Hands Up Don't Shoot shirts during the season. I can't remember which one it was, but I know they did that. As a team. There's high schools players nationwide that have been taking kneels. I saw something at University of Pennsylvania, 2 cheerleaders, and this is at UPenn. That's a top program in the country, right? 2 black cheerleaders took a kneel during the national anthem. They spoke with their coach about it. They got blessing from the athletic directors. I mean, this is something that I'm glad more people are starting to take to light and realize that there is a role for athletes to be able to be leaders in terms of bringing social movement or social awareness. And then Colin Kaepernick did it in the best way he thought possible. And by doing it during the national anthem, I think that has sparked huge discussion. A lot of it has been negative, saying, why the hell is he kneeling? Get out the country, which, again, we can get a little bit more into that later. But I think some of it now is finally starting to curb more to why is he actually kneeling? And I hope that it continues to go down a direction where we start examining why is he actually kneeling? Why is this an issue, right? Because, again, we all probably might have individual stories about how what he's doing in terms of kneeling for police brutality, we've been affected by some way with a police interaction where we can relate to that type of situation where we felt scared, we felt nervous, we felt uncomfortable in the presence as somebody that's supposed to be protecting you. So, again, I think athletes have a very strong opportunity and a very huge platform to be able to speak out, and I don't think that their voice should be the voice of all black people or all Hispanics or all women, but I think their voice should be one that can be the driving force to start the discussion, because they can't do it by themselves, right? I think it's a jump off point to be able to start the discussion and get things moving forward. And I think Kaepernick has been able to do that in terms of bringing more awareness to police brutality and again, the shooting of unarmed black men. So, I think we all kind of see things in a similar way, but athletes.
I mean, we just need to quash that notion right now that, like, I mean, if your argument is that if you don't like the national anthem, you should leave. Like, if that's what you're sort of hitching your horse to, then you need to be kicked directly in the nuts. Nobody's arguing that America's not better than fucking Afghanistan. Like, we get it. I don't know why that's something that people are rallying around. And then, you know, all we see is sort of people throwing up pictures with very, you know, eloquently written soliloquies about disabled veterans who also stand for the national anthem. I think that you made a good point that, you know, you would stand for it because it's that personal connection to you comes from your father. Okay, great. That's fine. Does that signal to me that you, like, don't understand that there's a problem? No. I don't know why we can't unravel these things, right? Like, why can't we unpack these things and put them where they belong? You know, similarly, I think the three of us are relatively enlightened young men. I think if you said, hey, do you believe that women deserve equal pay? We'd say, yeah. And we'd say, do you believe that the LGBTQ community deserves the rights that they've been fighting for? Yeah. You know, but in the same vein, you know, what if you know, and I think to that argument, you know, if I see you stand for the national anthem, I'm not like, wow, that guy's an Uncle Tom. In the same way that if three of us don't go to, like, a gay pride rally, what are they like, oh, those black dudes hate gays? No, like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know? And so I feel like we need to look at these things, we need to unpack them a little more intelligently. You know, and personally, like, my dad's white, and if my dad stands for the national anthem, am I just gonna, like, go ballistic? Like, oh, you turn your back on your entire family. Well, I mean, no, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And I think we're so apt, and I think we've all sort of said it, to look at things that don't connect and put them together in a way that just, like, turns into this inflammatory shitstorm. You know, just like we've put together Kaepernick's kneeling with anti-patriotism. And then all of a sudden, that's exactly what it is. So now there's all these anti-patriotic young black people, and he's poisoned the well, and Francis Scott Key's rolling over in his grave somewhere. And the simple fact of the matter is that, like, that's just a waste of time. You know, it's a waste of everybody's time, and it's detracting from the, you know, from the mission.
So would you stand? Like, if you go to a sporting event tomorrow, would you stand?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, and that's actually a question I asked myself as I was driving to my sister's game, and I missed the national anthem. So I, like, inadvertently totally pussied out. I don't know. I don't actually know. I might. I don't know. Here's what's interesting to me, and I think this is why this is so interesting to me, because this is where you and I differ, is that I feel like I'm really interested in sort of the sociocultural intellect of it all. You know, I don't know that I fancy myself much of a protester, and that might make me a pussy, you know, but I'm very interested in the why, in the what, you know, and so that's why this conversation is very interesting to me. And that's why I think it's interesting to me, and also to you who are from biracial families, you know, and are we obligated, and am I obligated to feel some kind of way? Like, yeah, like there's a problem. There's a huge problem. And yeah, I feel like I feel less safe than I should for no reason. None of us have criminal records. All of us are, like, upstanding, well-educated citizens as far as they know. You know, but we, in the heat of the moment, could end up like all of these other African American guys who have what, just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or just looked the part. So, you know, again, to get back to that question, I don't know, because I don't know that, you know, I don't know. That's my long-winded answer is I don't know. I think I probably would, because I have, but I don't want that to detract from the fact that I understand that there's an issue and that we need to work to rectify it.
What about you, Tommy?
It's a tough call. I've kind of been thankful that I haven't had to go to any sporting events. I'm just letting my LA Galaxy season tickets float away right now. But to be honest, if I went tomorrow, I probably wouldn't. And I would hope that I don't get my ass kicked for it, or I'd hope that I don't have to deal with like hecklers, but I would prepare myself for it. And that would be tough because, you know, I'm extremely grateful to live in America. And I actually, you know, I want to figure out a way to make America better on like a big scale. It's a career ambition of mine. But part of the way to do that is to be upfront about how you feel. And at this point, I feel like I'd be more inclined to kneel, or, you know, I'm not on the field, so I wouldn't kneel, but I would sit in my seat. On charity, I think solidarity is important. And that would be not only a way of expressing how I feel, but expressing how I feel about the Kaepernick situation. And, you know, I've been encouraged by the fact that more and more athletes have been taking a stand by taking a knee. And I think that it would say more about how I feel to kneel or to sit than it would to stand. And I hope the people who know me wouldn't say like, oh, well, he doesn't love America or all this other garbage that people are saying about Kaepernick. But I think for me right now, I think I would sit. And I'm hoping that I wouldn't be the only one in the stadium. But, you know, soccer in America is a pretty white audience in general. Like, it's very white and upper middle class if you look at the demographics of it, which is why it's taking off in the Pacific Northwest and such. But, you know, I'd be prepared to kind of be on my own there, try and make it to my car. And on that note, you know, I hope that by the time I do get to the next game, that more and more people have done the same. And it kind of drives me nuts. This is like my final thoughts on this topic, that Megan Rapinoe is still the only white athlete who's opted to do something about this. Like, that drives me fucking insane, because it's almost like, you look at the picture, I forget which high school it was, of the volleyball team, where there's the three black girls in the middle all taking a knee, and the white classmates are standing, their white teammates are standing next to them. It's like, yeah, you're not wrong for deciding to stand during the national anthem. It's your right. But you mean to tell me that not a single white person out there feels like they should take a stand with their black brothers and sisters? I know plenty of white people who would be like, I believe it's so messed up. You know, they tell me that. I believe it's so messed up what's going on right now with killings, with prejudice in general, with racism in America. What are you waiting for? Do you feel like you can't kneel? Are you worried about what, your like sponsorships? I know Brandon Marshall, the linebacker from the Broncos, lost his sponsorships. Funny enough, CenturyLink, who owns the naming rights to the Seahawks stadium, and the Seahawks have been one of the most vocal teams on this, they revoked their sponsorship deal with Brandon Marshall because he knelt down. And it's like, when is the support going to come from the other side? Like, I've said this a lot of times to people, that I feel like men have an important role in ending sexism, and straight people have an important role in ending homophobia. And I think white people have an extremely important role in ending racism, if only because they have all of the impact. They have all of the platform. You know, and I think it's the owner of the Dolphins. I think his last name's Ross. I want to say Stephen Ross. But he has so much influence as a billionaire and a team owner. And he came down to the locker room after Arian Foster and a few other guys on the Dolphins kneeled during the national anthem, and basically congratulated them on taking a stand. And he has his own personal initiatives. So some sort of ending racism through sports platform that he's been pushing. So I commend him, and I think we need more people like that. So, long way of saying, yes, I would probably sit during the national anthem, and I am eagerly awaiting the day where more white athletes take a stand with Kaepernick to help actually make this a unified movement.
So let me ask you this, and Willie, we'll get to you. You're not getting off easy. But let me ask you this. Does that mean that in that vein, the three of us are, you know, in sort of the same milieu? Should we be going to gay pride rallies and to women's rights functions and right? Because, you know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think that'd be great. But how far does that extend, right? How far are – because what it comes down to – for me, first of all, I don't disagree with you, but what it comes down to for me is that level of empathy, right? You know who gets it? Nobody gets it better than you in that sense, right? I don't think that it's necessarily disrespectful, you know, and Rapinoe's fantastic, and I've liked Rapinoe for a long time. You know, but I think that's my question, right? Is that how far does that extend? And where, you know, how far does that support structure go for all of the other freedoms that marginalized groups are fighting for? And when you look at that, you say, look, and that far, I mean, are we dropping the ball in more theaters than this? Should there be more straight people at gay pride rallies, or is there more of an obligation for men to be a part of women's rights in this same vein?
Absolutely. And it depends on how strongly you feel. Like, there's ways to support that don't require a lot of time. And we generally tell ourselves that we don't have time or we don't have the resources to do it. Oh, I feel bad for that homeless guy, but I don't have $1 to give him. Or, you know, I'm totally into LGBTQ rights and, you know, I just don't know how to support. I actually got a chance to be in the Pride Parade in DC one year with Living Social when I worked for them, which was pretty cool. I felt good about that because it was like an opportunity, even if it was just part of like a big party that's everyone goes to in DC. It's like a cultural thing because DC is a very gay-friendly city. But it felt good to do that, and it was a rare occasion where I felt like I had done something to show support on a very visible level. Like, my gay friends, my gay family, like they know how I feel about it. They know that I accept them. And most people would probably assume if they don't know explicitly how I feel about it. But yeah, if you feel strongly about an issue and you're not doing anything about it, in my mind, if you ask yourself the question of, should I be doing more? And you say yes, then do more. If you say no, then maybe it's because you don't feel that strongly about that issue. And you're generally, just because we're humans and we're egocentric, it's gonna hit closer to home if you're gay to do LGBTQ things, or if you're black to do Black Lives Matter stuff or to protest police brutality. You know, in general, you're going to try and advance your cause to a certain extent. But I do think that all three movements and other movements would be more successful if there was sort of cross-pollination. And that is something that I've definitely believed. And on a general level, it comes down to showing respect and empathy, as Willie said. But on a tactical level, it's really just power in numbers and like a more mixed group showing more solidarity. Like, you know, the most striking images, you know, of the civil rights movement were oftentimes it was like a white woman standing next to a black man, or like a Jewish person standing next to a black woman. It was like this unified front of everyone in America wants this to stop, not just one marginalized group. So yes, there should be more black people campaigning for women's rights, and more women campaigning for gay rights, and more gay people campaigning for less police brutality. That is like a huge element of success for this campaign, I think.
Willie, what do you think? Sit or stand, or kneel, or roll over?
So, unlike y'all, I actually had the opportunity to hear the national anthem being played. It was on Monday. So this week for work, I've been at an Air Force convention or conference this whole week, right? So everybody ranging from your high-ranking 4-star generals, I think today wrapped up, and probably about a panel of maybe 8 to 10 men and women up there, and they were all 3-star generals or above. So you're looking at the top of the food chain in terms of the Air Force. I think one of the guys was the chief of staff of the Air Force. That's pretty much as high as you can get in the Air Force there. And so I will say it's very interesting because I did stand, right? I did stand. And I will say that what was going through my head at that time when I was standing was much different than what I remember it being through college soccer or through high school soccer. During those times, I look back at high school soccer. I think my first 2 years there, we sang it together. We lined up as a team, started lineups out there, and we all sang it together, right? Everything was golden. Then, as I got to my junior, senior year, instead of singing an anthem, I would say a prayer, asking the bless my team and help me be able to lead my team out into the field, yada yada yada. And then that carried on through college, right? Still saying a prayer for the health and success and all that good stuff, and being blessed with being able to be on the field. So I carried on through college, being able to say that type of prayer. I found myself on Monday when it was played standing, and I was just looking around. And I was like, I wonder if anybody else in here now thinks about what Colin Kaepernick is trying to get across as his point. And I found myself thinking about, should I be standing? Do I feel? I felt some type of dissonance standing. It's like, does me standing take away from the fact that I strongly believe that there is something wrong in terms of police brutality, right? So while I stood, the emotions and thoughts that were going through my head during that standing, completely different than what it's ever been before. And I think that's definitely been sprung from the fact from Kaepernick's protest. And again, my experience for standing, I feel like I always did it as a thing out of respect for the military, my father. And again, I don't know what the genesis of that is. It's not like he's ever came up to me or told me like, "Hey son, you better stand your ass up for the national anthem, because if you don't, you're disrespecting me." That's never come across. But I've always just had that connection of the military and national anthem. But I definitely do think that my thought process going through it now is now more of wondering what those men and women in uniform now think about that process. And now it's thinking about, not that process, about what Kaepernick's trying to bring to light. And do those people empathize with what's going on in the colored community? And so, again, why I feel like I will stand, I feel like my mind will always go to that area, and it will make me, again, I don't see myself sitting down, but I do now feel way more conflicted about standing up. And is it the right thing for me to do per se, or is there, or should I be taking a knee or sitting down, because I strongly believe that something needs to be done in this country about race relations and about police brutality. So while I do think I will probably stand, the thoughts that go through my head now are a lot different than what they've ever been. And so question, future, I don't know. Yep.
Question for both of you. You mentioned it and you alluded to it. So let's answer it. You said something to the effect of, does my standing detract from this movement? Does it detract from the message? Does it water down the let's get something out there betwixt the three of us and to the whoever is going to watch this. There's no debate that we agree in broad strokes, right? The three of us obviously agree that in the main this shit's got to change. And I think what's very interesting is the mechanisms by which it does, because we've got different backgrounds. But the question inside of that is, standing detract from the message? Are you essentially in some way diluting the movement by standing, or are we able to look at it and take a different turn and say, well, no, because my activism exists in this way, and I have my reason for doing this in this way, and they don't necessarily intersect, because I can very openly, proudly, and adamantly say that there is a problem that needs to change?
I don't think it necessarily takes away from the quote movement, right? I don't think the national anthem, or kneeling during the national anthem, protesting during the national anthem, is the driving force behind the changes that need to happen for police brutality. I think it was a mechanism that was used to bring a ton of awareness through an athletic platform that has now made the conversation more prevalent, right? This isn't the first step in terms of people protesting police brutality or trying to bring awareness of police brutality, but I think this was probably the biggest one because it was done on the biggest stage, like we spoke about earlier with athletes. They have that huge platform. So I think standing during the national anthem, I don't think detracts from that, as long as we continue to push forward that conversation, whether it be via social media or one-on-one conversations, because I think it needs to be more of a grassroots effort versus a huge platform, like from the top down. I think it needs to be from the ground up in terms of grassroots, kind of spreading that message with the individual conversations, because as soon as that starts happening, maybe a conversation I might have with one person might lead to that person having a conversation with somebody else, and then now that can start spreading that way. So I don't think standing during national anthem detracts from that message, but I do think that as long as you're pushing forward, quote, your agenda, I still think you can be effective while still standing for the anthem.
Mr. West Coast.
I would agree that you're right. If you want to stand, then stand. If you want to kneel, then kneel. Like, I wouldn't judge the person that I don't agree with for what their opinion is. Like, there's a lot of reasons to stand for the national anthem. Regardless of whether it should or not, it has definitely become culturally significant as a way of saying, like, we respect and appreciate the sacrifices that our military makes. Whether or not it should stand for that is kind of irrelevant, because it does to a lot of people. So, if you feel like you need to support the military heroes by standing, then you go ahead. I've heard from some friends of mine that are in the military who have said to me that even as an Army officer, standing for the national anthem wasn't part of some sort of patriotism. Like, exactly. Your right to protest as you see fit. I think that the biggest outcome of what Kaepernick did is that regardless of whether you choose to stand or sit, I feel like a lot of people will be thinking about it during the national anthem. And if nothing, if all else is lost in this effort, other than the fact that it becomes part of your process to ruminate on how you feel about America during the national anthem, then that's the biggest victory. Because most of the time I'm just kind of like scanning the crowd and waiting for the national anthem to be over and anticipating some fireworks going off and making sure they don't scare me or something. Like, my mind was never thinking about America during the national anthem. And regardless of whether you stand or sit, I feel like a lot of people are doing it with conviction now. Whereas before they were just kind of marching along doing what was culturally normal. So if the end result is that people are being more mindful of what they're doing, regardless of whether they choose to kneel or stand, that's a huge victory for all of us. I know there's there's people at different games and on September 11th, and the fact that it had to happen on September 11th was a complication. But there were people who were like, I stand for them because they stood for us. And I'm like, okay, bro, that's like a soft metaphor. You could have easily said, I knelt for them because they knelt for us. Like, they were on their bare stomachs in trenches, or laying flat in a trench. So it's not like standing has any more significance than taking a knee. Taking a knee in a lot of ways is a way of showing deference. So I actually appreciate the fact that he went from sitting down to taking a knee, because it's a symbolic gesture.
That changed after, I think it was a conversation with Nate Boyer, right? I think he was an Army vet that Kaepernick went to speak with about the whole process that he's going through. So
the man did
exactly.
his research.
So, regardless of whether you choose to stand or sit, I would challenge you to think about why you're doing it, as opposed to just doing it because you think you should or how it's going to be received. If you do that, then you've done your part. Step one of doing your part, I'd say.
So dissonance is the answer, right? And in this climate, I think is positive, and it exists, within all three of us. And I played the middle because I'm, for the first time, I think the three of us are not sure. It doesn't seem like any of us are really sure. It seems like Willie's the most sure, as he has a military connection who can still kick his ass and is dead. But Timon and myself, I get the indication that we're not sure. I'm not sure, and I don't think you are either. And I think that
I won't even say that I'm sure, to be 100% honest. I do it, but again, like the same thing that Tom's talking about, my thought process has changed during me standing during the anthem now, right? Now my thoughts aren't, to say that they were always on the country, that would be false. Again, I went through my timeline of what my thought process was during the anthem during those things, but now my thought process is completely different. Now I'm thinking about what Kaepernick's trying to bring to light. So again,
Sure. And then I think
I'm 95% sure I would say that I would sit. So I'm pretty fair. I'm fairly certain that I would sit.
Really? Okay. I think I'm probably closer to 60-40. But either way, I think that the main thing here is that, okay, so that dissonance and that like you said, it's creating a conversation. So I guess my question now is what's next, right? What's the end game? Because let's say that now we've got a critical mass of people, because here's what we've gotten to a point of, which I think is interesting. A lot of folks have done a really good job and been really diligent about unpacking the anthem for what it is. And we say, okay, Francis Scott Key was a slave owner, so land of the free and home of the brave didn't apply to black people, so they're not talking about us in the first place, so fuck them anyway. So now we've worked really hard to distance the national anthem and patriotism, which in effect, in kind of a backdoor way, at least in my mind, almost not detracts from the gesture, but the argument could be made that, well, if the national anthem doesn't have anything to do with America, then you're just sitting down for a song, so whatever the fuck ever, right? So my question is, what's next? How do we move this forward from just athletes and African Americans and hopefully others joining in and presenting it as a salient nonviolent protest to actually doing something that we can demonstrably say, look, this stops happening or this happens less? Because look, this might just be the media machine, it might just be me waking up, but it seems like it's happening more. And it seems like these instances are becoming more frequent and like more totally banana land, and more indefensible. Not that Trayvon Martin's wasn't. I mean, that was horrendous in its own right. But, I mean, it seems like it's gotten to the point now where, I mean, what do you do? And like, when's the line where we look at it and we say, Richard Sherman said it. He goes, what do I tell these kids? I do a lot of community service. I talk to kids. How do I explain to kids who look like me or who come from an area like he did, right? And he's achieved his ass off. I mean, what do we do? What do we do? What's the next step? And then how do we start to make some tangible and really pick away at this thing?
No, so I mean, I think that's a very good question on that one. And I mean, and to be honest, I think that's something that we can delve into the future, because I think that ties into a lot of what we want to be able to talk about. Obviously, we didn't get into the end piece in terms of how should we protest, but I think that drives our next conversation. Is like, what should we do to be able to drive a conversation forward, to be able to achieve a result that we want to be able to see within the country. And I guess, just as a wrap up point for myself, is that when I'm thinking about this, whether you stand or sit during the anthem, to me, that's not the main point, right? That's not the main point. To me, I think the main point that has now been started, with Kaepernick doing what he has done, is now I think the conversation is slowly shifting from why the hell is he disrespecting the country, which I don't think he is, obviously, to maybe hopefully now people can now look at why he is actually kneeling in the first place, right? What can we do about police brutality? What can we do about prejudice? What can we do about racism in this country, right? I think that is my large takeaway. I don't care if you sit or stand, but as long as you're able to gather some sort of empathy for what people of color are going through in this country in terms of police relationships and prejudice and inequality, I think as long as that's starting to come to the forefront of your mind and you now realize that it's a pertinent issue for millions of people in this country, I think the job is now being done well by Colin Kaepernick by pushing that conversation forward.
My closing argument, so to speak, would be that I hope that more people, if not everyone who's wagered an opinion on this, would figure out what issues they care about, and then moving forward, ask themselves if they're doing enough. And then think about the issues of people that are close to them and ask if they should be doing more there also. So regardless of whether it's tied to police brutality or civil rights, whatever it is that you feel strongly about, ask yourself if you're doing enough when you have the time, when you have the platform. Maybe it's still during the national anthem, given that this is how it came about. Maybe it's on your commute to work. Whatever it is, if you feel strongly about issues and you're not doing anything about it, then you should ask yourself if you're doing more, and you should figure out how it is that you should do more. And we'll get into, I think, more of protesting in general in the next episode. But for now, my takeaway would be you owe it to yourself to stand up for what you believe in. And kudos to Colin Kaepernick for doing it in a way that was so effective for himself. Regardless of whether you agree with it or not, you should be challenged to do something on your own platform that is of that same level. Like if you feel strongly about anything, and if you don't feel strongly about anything, then you kind of suck. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. My closing argument is I encourage, and I look these, I love these dudes, and I think that this has been a great conversation. My closing argument is to educate yourself. Educate yourself on what's going on in your world, and you don't have to be an activist. You don't have to have a huge platform. You don't have to have 1 million Twitter followers. You don't have to be a millionaire athlete to make a difference. And that all starts with education. It starts with taking time to figure out why things are happening, to do your due diligence and unpack what's going on in your world. And whether you're white, black, Hispanic, gay, straight, upside down, inside out, it doesn't matter. I think time is absolutely right, but you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your community. You owe it to your friends and family and children, if you have them, to have a firm foundation to form your opinions on. Don't form your opinions based on Facebook. Don't form your opinions based on the news outlets you watch. Bias exists everywhere, and understand that bias exists, and do a really good job of learning, and hunger for that knowledge. And I think that's where this whole thing starts. I think it all starts with everybody educating themselves and then having these conversations. And the three of us didn't agree on everything today, but I came away from this more enlightened than I did when I went in. Have these conversations with people who don't agree with you. Don't make your decisions based on creed or color or socioeconomic status or any of that other shit that we make decisions on, right? And likewise, don't immediately diminish opinions that you don't agree with to bullshit. There's a little more enlightened thinking that I think we could all benefit from. My last question to you guys is one that I've sort of been thinking about through an undercurrent throughout all this, and probably throughout the past 2 years. You think about the places where we live and the places where we come from and what we do on a regular basis. Here's my question. How safe do you guys feel? Are you guys worried that, you'll be killed by the police?
From the time I was young, I've held my breath every time I walk by a cop. Like I recall the first time that I was stopped because I looked like a suspect. I was 12 years old and sitting in the passenger seat of my white mother's car. She straight up told me, she was like, "You don't look like a suspect. They're just stopping black males because, we just look alike to them or something." But I was always kind of raised with the knowledge, being in New York City, the NYPD being one of the most prominent police organizations that had dust-ups with black men. And so cops have always made me nervous, regardless of whether that should be or not. That's the truth. So, yeah, that hasn't gone away. I probably look guilty as hell every time a cop comes around because I get nervous. I start to feel anxiety. So, yes, I do feel uncomfortable around police officers, and I do fear that, I could be on the wrong end of one of these incidents.
So I think that ties directly into what you did before during one of these shootings. Timing was when I think you either tweeted it or you put it on Facebook and you just put your name as a hashtag. My bad. It wasn't on Twitter. Facebook.
We're not going to get that Twitter sponsorship.
I'm going to take it. This portion of the program is brought to you by Xfinity by Comcast. By the way, fuck you, Comcast. Sorry, go on. Continue, Willie.
But I think it was, Instagram post then that you had that had your name in the hashtag. Do I think it's going to happen to me? I like to think not. But to say that, again, is it in the back of my mind every time? Yeah, I don't know how I would react. right? So obviously sometimes it doesn't take too much, for it to happen. So
To clarify, I don't think it will happen to me because I know how to navigate myself out of those situations. But I do feel like, there's a chance that I wouldn't get a chance to explain myself. Like if a cop pulls up on me.
It's the thing though, where you going to navigate? You got dudes lying on the ground. You got one guy trying to wrangle an autistic man in the street. You got homeboy sitting in his fucking car. I agree with you. And I know you and you're savvy and we're all savvy, but that's my problem, right? Is that, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, I think, again, I feel like that's probably something that we'll probably get into in a future episode then. Delve a little bit deeper before we start going even more down this path. But I think it's a good question to think about. But I think in terms of today and in our conversation, I think it's kind of as a wrap up. I mean, I think we brought up 3 great points. Myself, I think we should have more empathy for what people are going through, right? And then Price is speaking about education and timing. I mean, you hit the good point of stand for something, right? And I think that's a very good takeaway for today. Empathy, education, stand up for something that you believe in. And I think if you have those 3 things going for you, then I think that a lot of the issues that we have currently going on within our country can start to become resolved, right? Versus how things are going today, where everything is just spitting vitriol and hate. So
use of vitriol.
Again, thanks for everybody that's going to be, checking in on this, whether it's 2 people, whether it's 200 people, what have you. But again, don't hesitate to ask us questions. We want to have this discussion. We want to have that open forum. But I think that concludes, episode 2. Be on the lookout for episode 3 as we start delving a little bit more into protesting and some of the police brutality. And again, start asking us questions. Ask us questions. We want to have that open forum for y'all.
Ask Willie how much he weighs.
And with that, we're out.